The fluorescent lights of Mountain View Regional Hospital cast their steady glow across the quiet emergency department as Dr. Maya Patel finished updating her last patient's chart. The midnight shift had been surprisingly calm, just a few minor cases and one appendectomy. She was about to grab a quick coffee when the emergency alert system blared to life, its harsh tone shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Incoming emergency transport, ETA 3 minutes, the system announced. All available trauma team members to Emergency Bay 1. Dr. Patel frowned at the lack of detail. Usually, they received at least basic information about the incoming patient. She hurried toward the emergency bay, joined by nurses and technicians who seemed equally puzzled by the vague alert. Through the glass doors, she could see the unusual configuration of lights approaching, not the typical pattern of an ambulance. The vehicle that pulled up was unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was sleek, black, and completely unmarked, flanked by government vehicles with tinted windows. Men in dark suits emerged first, their expressions grave as they approached the medical team. "Dr. Patel," one of them asked, consulting a tablet. "I'm Agent Chen. What I'm about to tell you is classified under national security. Your entire team will need to sign non-disclosure agreements, but right now, we have a critical patient who needs immediate care." Before Dr. Patel could respond, the back of the unmarked vehicle opened, revealing a sight that made her breath catch in her throat. On the stretcher lay a being that defied everything she knew about anatomy. Its body was roughly humanoid but composed entirely of translucent crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with internal light. The light was flickering erratically, and deep fractures ran through several of the crystal formations. The medical team stood frozen for a precious second before their training kicked in. Dr. Patel's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Whatever they are, they're a patient who needs our help. Let's move." As they rushed the stretcher inside, she noticed that the crystalline being was conscious, its surface emitting weak pulses of light in complex patterns. The movement seemed deliberate, almost like, "They're trying to communicate," Nurse Sarah Rodriguez said, echoing Dr. Patel's thoughts. "Look at the patterns." The beam's lights flickered more urgently as they transferred it to a trauma bay. Traditional monitoring equipment proved useless. There was no way to measure vital signs they didn't understand. Dr. Patel had to rely on her observational skills and medical intuition. The fractures in the crystalline structure were spreading, and the internal light was growing dimmer. "They're equivalent of bleeding out," she muttered, studying the spreading fractures. "We need to stabilize these breaks before they propagate further." She turned to her team. "Rodriguez, hit crystallography on the phone. Anyone who's still in the research department. Chen, I need every scanning device we have that won't emit radiation. Something tells me CT and X-ray are off the table for a being made of living crystal." The alien's light patterns became more erratic, and small crystalline fragments began to fall away from its body. Dr. Patel made a rapid decision. "We need to think outside the box. What promotes crystal stability? Temperature control, electromagnetic fields." She snapped her fingers. "Get me the prototype MRI-guided ultrasound system from the research wing. If we can't use traditional methods, we'll have to write new ones." As her team rushed to gather the requested equipment, Dr. Patel leaned closer to her patient. The beam's lights had formed into a repeating pattern, slower but more distinct than before. She pulled out her phone and started recording the sequence. Whether it was a name, a warning, or vital medical information, they would need to decode it. Looking into the crystalline face of her patient, Dr. Patel felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about saving one life. It was humanity's first chance to prove itself as healers on a cosmic scale, and she was determined not to let either her patient or her species down. The prototype MRI-guided ultrasound system hummed to life as Dr. Patel adjusted its settings. The crystalline being's light patterns had grown weaker, but they still pulsed in distinct sequences. Nurse Rodriguez was recording each pattern while simultaneously coordinating with the crystallography department over video call. The fracture patterns suggest a crystalline matrix similar to quartz, but with impossible complexity. Dr. Harrison from crystallography explained, his voice tinny through the tablet speaker. Those light emissions, they're not random. They're following the crystal's natural resonance patterns. Dr. Patel's eyes widened. Could we use the ultrasound to respond on those same frequencies? She adjusted the machine's output, carefully matching the wavelength to their patient's diminishing pulses. The response was immediate. The alien's lights brightened momentarily, forming new patterns. Look at the monitor. Rodriguez pointed to the ultrasound display. Instead of the usual grayscale image, complex geometric patterns were forming on the screen. They shifted and changed, almost like. It's a diagram, Dr. Patel breathed. They're showing us their internal structure. She studied the patterns intently. These recurring formations must be their equivalent of vital organs. And look, these fracture lines are spreading toward this central node. The alien's light pulses confirmed her observation, becoming more focused around the area she indicated. Dr. Patel realized they had achieved their first real communication. She directed the ultrasound toward different areas of the crystalline body, and each time, the being responded with detailed patterns showing the internal structure of that region. They're not just a patient, Rodriguez said softly. They're trying to help us help them. Working quickly, the team began mapping the alien's anatomy through this improvised sign language of light and sound. The crystalline being was using the ultrasound's feedback to create three-dimensional models of their internal systems, showing exactly where the damage was worst. The central node is like their heart, Dr. Patel explained to her team. These branching structures must be energy distribution pathways, similar to our circulatory system, but conducting light and energy instead of blood. She pointed to the spreading fractures. The crash damaged their primary distribution node. That's why their light is failing. A new pattern appeared on the screen, more urgent, more complex. Dr. Harrison leaned closer to his camera. Those are molecular diagrams, he said excitedly. They're showing us their crystal structure at the atomic level. And look, there's a pattern of degradation spreading through the matrix. Dr. Patel studied the diagram intently. It's like their version of shock. The trauma is causing their crystal matrix to destabilize. She turned to her team. We need to stabilize these fractures before the degradation reaches the central node. Rodriguez, get me the piezoelectric field generators from the physical therapy department. Chen, I need the finest grade diamond paste from dental and every growth medium from the tissue culture lab. As her team scattered to gather supplies, Dr. Patel continued her ultrasound communication with the patient. The alien's patterns were becoming more elaborate, including what appeared to be mathematical formulae. They were trying to teach her about their physiology even as their condition deteriorated. Hold on, she told her patient, hoping they could understand her determination, if not her words. We're learning. We're adapting. Just hold on. The beam's lights flickered in what she chose to interpret as acknowledgement. Through the impromptu language they'd developed, human and alien were bridging a gap that spanned the stars. Medicine, Dr. Patel realized, might prove to be humanity's first true universal language, not through advanced technology, but through the fundamental drive to help and heal. The piezoelectric field generators created a subtle hum as Dr. Patel carefully adjusted their positioning around the crystalline patient. She had arranged them in a pattern that matched the alien's internal energy pathways, based on the diagrams they had shared. The diamond paste, mixed with specialized growth medium, had been carefully applied to the worst fractures. Field synchronization at 40%, Rodriguez reported, monitoring the readings. The patient's light patterns are stabilizing, but there's something else forming in the matrix. Dr. Patel leaned closer, studying the crystalline surface. Tiny new crystal formations were beginning to grow along the fracture lines where they had applied the mixture. The alien's lights pulsed rapidly, creating complex patterns across the ultrasound screen. They're surprised, Dr. Harrison translated from his video feed, analyzing the patterns. Those mathematical sequences suggest they expected a different healing process. Their technology usually involves quantum manipulation, not physical repair. Through their improvised communication system, the alien began sharing more information. Their species relied on automated healing pods that reconstructed damaged crystal matrices at the quantum level. The idea of using basic crystal growth principles was, to them, shockingly primitive, yet undeniably effective. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," Dr. Patel murmured, adjusting the field strength. "Look how the new growth is integrating with the existing structure. It's following their natural formation patterns." The aliens' lights brightened suddenly, forming new patterns that reflected off the hospital room's walls. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened as he interpreted the data. "They're saying our method is actually more efficient than their quantum reconstruction. The natural crystal growth allows for better energy flow than their artificial repairs." A soft chime from the monitoring equipment confirmed what they could see. The patient's energy distribution was stabilizing. The fractures were not only stopping their spread but beginning to heal, the new crystal growth creating stronger bonds than before. "Temperature dropping in the peripheral matrices," Rodriguez reported. "They're directing more energy to the central node. I think they're trying to help the healing process." Indeed, the alien was actively participating in their treatment, using their remaining energy to guide the crystal growth along optimal paths. The light patterns they emitted took on a more organized rhythm, synchronizing with the piezoelectric fields. Dr. Patel made a minor adjustment to the field generators. "They're teaching us even as we help them. See how they're showing us the ideal frequency for each section of their matrix." The team worked in focused silence, human and alien coordinating their efforts through their shared language of light and energy. Hours passed as they carefully guided the healing process, each small victory marked by stronger, more stable light patterns from their patient. Finally, the last major fracture sealed itself with new crystal growth. The alien's light emissions stabilized into a steady, strong glow that filled the room with shifting colors. Through the ultrasound interface, they projected a new set of patterns, simpler but somehow more profound. "It's a comparison," Dr. Harrison explained, his voice full of wonder. "They're showing us the difference between their traditional healing method and what we've accomplished here. Our approach used less energy, created stronger bonds, and allowed for natural variation in the crystal structure that actually improves their energy flow." Dr. Patel smiled as she studied the readouts. Sometimes innovation isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about seeing the problem from a new perspective. The aliens' lights pulsed in what they had come to recognize as agreement. Through the ultrasound interface, they began sharing more detailed information about their biology, no longer as a patient desperate for help, but as a colleague eager to exchange knowledge. In finding a way to heal one alien being, humanity had discovered something far more valuable, the proof that they had something unique to offer to the galaxy's medical knowledge, not despite their limitations, but because of them. As dawn broke over Mountain View Regional Hospital, the crystalline being's recovery room had transformed into an impromptu classroom. The walls were covered with holographic projections created by the aliens' light patterns, showing complex medical diagrams that merged both human and alien understanding of healing. Dr. Patel sat beside her patient, who had begun introducing themselves through mathematical sequences that translated roughly to Seeker of Healing Paths. The medical team had shortened it to Seeker, which earned them a shimmer of amused light patterns. "So your healing pods reconstruct damaged tissue instantly?" Dr. Patel asked through their ultrasound interface, fascinated by the aliens' description of their standard medical practices. Seeker's response created a detailed hologram showing their civilization's medical technology. The image depicted injured crystalline beings stepping into transparent chambers and emerging moments later, perfectly restored. However, the next series of light patterns conveyed something unexpected: concern. Dr. Harrison, who had finally arrived in person, translated the complex patterns. "They're saying the instant healing has a drawback. Their people have become completely dependent on the technology. When it fails, like in Seeker's case, they have no alternative methods. Through more light patterns, Seeker explained how their society had gradually lost the knowledge of natural healing processes. The pods were so efficient that no one bothered to study traditional medicine anymore. It was considered primitive, obsolete. But look at these growth patterns. Rodriguez pointed to the newly healed sections of Seeker's crystal matrix. The natural formation allows for better energy distribution than their artificial repairs. It's like the difference between a transplanted organ and one that grows naturally. Seeker's lights pulsed in agreement, creating a new diagram that compared their standard healing pod repairs to the crystal growth achieved through human treatment. The natural repairs showed more complex, resilient patterns that could actually adapt and strengthen over time. Dr. Patel leaned forward, studying the comparison. Your technology seeks perfection through uniformity. But biology, even crystalline biology, thrives on adaptation and variation. The aliens' response was immediate and enthusiastic, their lights creating a cascade of patterns that reflected off every surface. They began sharing case studies from their medical database, showing how repeated pod healing sometimes led to subtle degradation in crystal matrices over time. The uniformity of artificial repairs couldn't match the resilience of natural growth. It's not just about fixing what's broken, Dr. Patel realized aloud. It's about understanding the healing process itself. Each method we tried, each adjustment we made, we were learning and adapting along with you. Seeker projected a new series of patterns, this time showing their civilization's early medical history. Their ancestors had once understood natural healing processes, but that knowledge had been gradually lost as technology advanced. What humans considered primitive techniques were actually preserving crucial medical wisdom that Seeker's people had forgotten. As the morning shift arrived, they found the night team still deep in discussion with their alien patient. Dr. Patel was describing Earth's various medical traditions, from modern surgery to ancient healing practices that had stood the test of time. Seeker absorbed every detail, their lights creating increasingly complex patterns as they integrated this new knowledge with their own understanding. Your people have something we lost, Seeker communicated through their light patterns. You understand that healing is not just about the end result, but about the journey of recovery itself. Each challenge you overcome makes you stronger, more adaptable. Dr. Patel smiled, watching the interplay of light and crystal that had become as readable to her as any human expression. In teaching them about advanced alien medicine, Seeker had helped humanity recognize the unique value of their own medical heritage. Sometimes, the most advanced civilizations could learn from those they considered less developed, if they were willing to see with new eyes. The first sign of trouble came during the morning monitoring session. Seeker's light patterns, which had been strong and steady, suddenly flickered with an irregular rhythm. Dr. Patel, who had stepped out for a brief rest, rushed back to the recovery room when Rodriguez called her. The irregularities started 5 minutes ago, Rodriguez reported, adjusting the monitoring equipment. Their energy distribution is becoming erratic, and there's something strange happening in the newly grown crystal sections. Dr. Patel studied the crystal matrix closely. Tiny imperfections were spreading through the new growth like cracks in ice, but instead of breaking, the crystal was becoming cloudy. Seeker's light patterns had changed from their usual precise communications to chaotic bursts of color. It's like an infection, Dr. Harrison said, examining the readings from their instruments. But instead of bacteria, we're dealing with crystal lattice deterioration. The new growth is destabilizing at the molecular level. Through fragmented light patterns, Seeker managed to communicate that this was a known complication in their medicine. Their healing pods prevented it through quantum purification, but without that technology, the crystal matrix was vulnerable to cascading failures. Temperature rising in the affected areas, Rodriguez warned. The energy distribution network is trying to compensate, but it's making the deterioration spread faster. Dr. Patel's mind raced through possibilities. They couldn't use traditional antibiotics on a crystalline life form, and they had no way to replicate the quantum purification of the healing pods. They needed a solution that worked with their available resources. Show me the deterioration pattern again, she asked Seeker, who painfully projected a detailed diagram of the spreading contamination. The pattern looked familiar, tugging at something in her memory from her materials science courses. This is similar to what happens in semiconductor manufacturing, she realized aloud. When impurities infiltrate the crystal structure during growth. She turned to Harrison. What if we treat this like semiconductor purification? The crystallographer's eyes widened. Zone refining. It's risky. We'd be essentially recrystallizing sections of a living being. Better than letting the deterioration spread. Dr. Paddle responded, already planning the procedure. Rodriguez, get the piezoelectric generators reconfigured. We need to create a controlled temperature gradient. Dr. Harrison, I need the cleanest silicon crystal seeds you can find in the lab. As they prepared, Seeker's lights dimmed further, but they managed to share critical information about their crystal structure's thermal tolerance. The team worked quickly, setting up the equipment to create a precise moving band of heat that would travel through the affected crystal sections. This is going to be uncomfortable, Dr. Patel warned Seeker through their ultrasound interface. We're going to use heat to force the impurities to migrate through your crystal matrix. We'll trap them in sacrificial crystal seeds at each end. Seeker's lights pulsed once in understanding. They had never encountered this technique, but their deteriorating condition left no room for doubt. Dr. Patel took a deep breath and activated the modified equipment. The effect was immediate. As the heat zone moved through the crystal matrix, they could see the cloudiness collecting and moving with it, drawn by the temperature gradient. Seeker's lights flickered erratically with discomfort, but they held perfectly still, trusting their human caregivers. Impurities collecting in the seed crystals, Harrison reported, watching through a microscope. The cleared sections are showing improved energy conductivity. Pass by pass, they cleared the contamination from Seeker's crystal matrix. It was painstaking work, requiring perfect coordination between heat application and energy flow monitoring. One wrong move could shatter the delicate crystal structure they were trying to save. What would have been a routine treatment in Seeker's advanced society had become a revolutionary procedure on Earth, one that combined human materials science with alien biology in ways neither civilization had imagined possible. Hours passed as the team continued their delicate purification process. The contaminated seed crystals glowed an eerie purple as they collected more impurities from Seeker's matrix. Dr. Patel monitored each pass carefully, watching for any signs of stress in the crystalline structure. Final section clearing now, Rodriguez announced, her voice hoarse from the long procedure. Energy flow is stabilizing in the treated areas. As the last wave of heat dissipated, Seeker's lights gradually strengthened, forming clear, steady patterns once again. The crystal matrix, now free of contamination, showed an unexpected improvement. The purified sections transmitted light more efficiently than before. Look at these readings, Dr. Harrison said, examining the data. The zone refining didn't just remove the impurities. It actually realigned the crystal structure into a more optimal configuration. Their energy throughput is 12% higher than their baseline. Seeker's light patterns erupted in excitement as they conducted their own internal diagnostics. Through their ultrasound interface, they shared their astonishment. Their civilization's quantum healing pods had always focused on exact restoration, never considering that the healing process could lead to enhancement. Sometimes damage forces us to rebuild stronger than before, Dr. Paddle explained, watching the play of light through Seeker's newly refined crystal matrix. It's a principle we see throughout nature on Earth. The aliens' response created a complex holographic display, showing the technical specifications of their healing pods alongside data from their current procedure. The comparison revealed something remarkable. The primitive zone refining technique had achieved results that their advanced quantum technology couldn't replicate. Dr. Harrison leaned forward, fascinated by the technical readouts. The quantum pods reconstruct crystal patterns perfectly, but that perfection might be a limitation. Our method allowed for natural variation and optimization during the recrystallization process. Seeker began sharing more detailed medical data, their light patterns moving with increasing excitement. They explained that crystal matrix deterioration was a growing problem in their civilization. Their perfect quantum repairs sometimes led to accumulated stress in the crystal structure over multiple healings. No one had considered that a less precise, more natural approach might be the solution. "We should document everything," Rodriguez suggested, already starting to organize their notes. The temperature gradients, the timing of each pass, the composition of the seed crystals. But Seeker's next communication interrupted her. The alien created a series of patterns showing similar crystal structures throughout their body, each one subtly misaligned from countless quantum repairs. They were requesting a complete treatment, not out of medical necessity, but as a voluntary optimization. Dr. Patel hesitated. A full-body procedure would be much more complex. "We'd need to." Her words trailed off as Seeker projected a new set of diagrams. They had already calculated the optimal sequence of treatments, building on the human technique, but incorporating their own deep understanding of crystalline biology. The alien wasn't just accepting human methods, they were helping to perfect them. "This is beyond anything we imagined," Dr. Harrison breathed, studying the proposed procedure. "We're not just treating an injury anymore. We're developing an entirely new field of medicine." Dr. Patel watched the intricate dance of light and crystal that represented Seeker's improved energy flow. What had started as an emergency response to a crashed alien was evolving into something revolutionary. Human intuition and practical experience were combining with alien knowledge and biology to create therapeutic techniques that neither civilization had dreamed possible. And as Seeker's enthusiastic light patterns painted the room with shifting colors, Dr. Patel realized that they had done more than just heal a patient. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology, but in their ability to see beyond it, to find elegant solutions in unexpected places. News of the successful treatment spread rapidly through both human and alien channels. Within days, Mountain View Regional Hospital found itself at the center of an unprecedented medical revolution. Dr. Patel stood at her office window, watching as another crystalline ship touched down in the newly constructed landing area, where the parking lot had once been. 3 more arriving this afternoon, Rodriguez reported, bringing in another stack of translated medical files. All of them have similar crystal stress patterns from repeated quantum healing. They're calling it cascade fatigue syndrome. The hospital had undergone a dramatic transformation. One wing had been completely redesigned to accommodate crystalline patients, with specially modified equipment based on their experiences with Seeker. Medical teams from around the world were arriving to learn the new techniques, bringing expertise from fields as diverse as materials science and quantum physics. "The latest results from the follow-up studies are in," Dr. Harrison announced, entering with a holographic display showing Seeker's complete recovery data. "The optimized crystal matrix is maintaining its improved efficiency. Several leading physics journals are asking to publish our findings." Dr. Patel nodded, remembering how Seeker's voluntary optimization procedure had refined their technique. Each subsequent treatment had taught them more about the intersection of human materials science and crystalline biology. But it wasn't just the technical aspects that were evolving. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission from the crystalline homeworld. The wall screen activated, showing a panel of luminescent beings, the High Medical Council themselves. Their light patterns, now easily readable thanks to the translation protocols developed with Seeker, expressed both humility and excitement. "Your success has challenged our fundamental assumptions about medical treatment," the Council's chief communicator expressed through patterns of light. "We propose a formal exchange of medical knowledge between our civilizations." The Council's next transmission caused the entire room to glow with projected data. They were sharing their complete medical database, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge about crystalline biology and quantum healing techniques. In return, they requested human expertise in materials science, practical medicine, and what they called adaptive recovery processes. "They're particularly interested in our emergency medicine protocols," Rodriguez noted, reviewing the transmission. The ability to improvise solutions with limited resources. They've never needed to develop those skills. Dr. Patel's attention was drawn to movement in the courtyard below. A young human doctor was working with a crystalline medical student, using simple ultrasound equipment to demonstrate how to detect subtle variations in crystal matrix density. Nearby, a crystalline healer was teaching a group of human physicians about energy flow patterns through living crystal structures. "We've started something remarkable here," Dr. Harrison observed, watching the scene. "It's not just about combining our medical knowledge. We're learning from each other's approaches to problem-solving itself." The hospital's research wing had become a hub of innovation, with human and crystalline scientists working side by side. Traditional medical equipment was being modified with crystalline technology, while quantum healing pods were being redesigned to incorporate principles from human materials science. "Latest update from the engineering team," Rodriguez said, checking her tablet. "They've successfully miniaturized the zone refining process. The portable units will be ready for testing next week." Dr. Patel smiled, remembering the desperate improvisation that had led to their first treatment. What had started as an emergency response had grown into something far more significant. Humanity had proven that they had something valuable to offer to even the most advanced civilizations, not despite their limitations, but because of them. The light patterns from the council screen shifted, forming words in English. "Perhaps the greatest healing happens when we learn from each other." As if in response, another crystalline ship appeared in the sky above the hospital, its surface gleaming with the promise of more discoveries to come. 6 months after Seeker's crash landing, Mountain View Regional Hospital hosted the first Interstellar Medical Conference. The main auditorium, originally designed for 300 people, had been expanded and modified to accommodate beings from 24 different species. Crystalline healers shed their light alongside humanoid doctors, while gaseous beings floated in specially designed containment fields that allowed them to participate in the discussions. Dr. Patel stood at the podium, looking out over the extraordinary gathering. Behind her, a giant screen displayed real-time translations in multiple formats: written languages, light patterns, chemical signatures, and even gravitational waves for the more exotic attendees. 6 months ago, we thought we were just treating a single patient, she began, as Rodriguez managed the translation systems. Instead, we discovered something far more valuable: the power of combining different approaches to healing. The display shifted to show footage from Seeker's initial treatment, followed by the subsequent refinements they had developed together. The audience watched intently as the presentation demonstrated how human materials science had revolutionized crystalline medical care. "But this was just the beginning," Dr. Patel continued. "Each new species we've encountered has taught us something remarkable about the nature of healing itself." The screen showed recent cases: a gaseous being whose containment field had been modeled on human blood vessel structures, a silicon-based life form whose neural pathways had been repaired using modified semiconductor manufacturing techniques. Each success had built upon the lessons learned from Seeker's treatment. From their position of honor in the front row, Seeker's lights pulsed with pride and enthusiasm. They had remained on Earth as the lead consultant for crystalline medicine, helping to bridge the gap between human and alien medical knowledge. Their own crystal matrix, now optimized far beyond its original state, served as a living testament to the possibilities of combining different medical traditions. "Today, we're not just sharing medical techniques," Dr. Patel said, gesturing to the research displays around the auditorium. "We're learning different ways of thinking about health and healing. Our limitations have become our strengths, pushing us to find creative solutions that more advanced technology might have overlooked." The presentation shifted to show the new medical technologies that had emerged from their collaboration. Quantum healing pods now incorporated zone refining principles, while human surgical techniques had been enhanced with crystalline energy manipulation. Each innovation represented a perfect blend of different approaches. But perhaps our greatest discovery wasn't medical at all, Dr. Patel observed, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. It was the realization that true advancement doesn't come from technology alone, but from our willingness to learn from each other. The audience responded with their various forms of approval: light displays, chemical releases, gravitational pulses, and good old-fashioned applause, all blending into a symphony of mutual understanding. As Dr. Patel concluded her presentation, a young crystalline medical student approached the podium. Their light patterns formed a question that the translation system rendered in multiple languages. What made humans think they could help a being so different from